A small region in Somalia heads to the polls, and the result could have huge consequences for the Horn of Africa. Kenya, Ethiopia and Somalia itself are jostling for influence over Jubbaland. So why is it so important, and what's at stake? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hashim Ahalbarra. A small region in Somalia is at the center of a growing power struggle in East Africa. The people of the autonomous federal state of Jubbaland will choose their president on Thursday. Somalia's neighbors are watching closely. Jubbaland's main city is Kismayo, a target of attacks by the armed group Al-Shabaab. 26 people died in a hotel assault last month. Jubbaland borders Kenya, which has soldiers there as part of the African Union's mission against Al-Shabaab. Somalia's central government wants more control over the region and warns it will not recognize the election winner. Let's have a look at Jubbaland. The autonomous region in southern Somalia was announced in 2010 and formalized the following year. The territory consists of the Gado, Lower Juba and Middle Juba provinces. The largest city is Kismayo. Al-Shabaab controlled Kismayo until it was driven out in 2012, but the armed group is still active in many areas. Jubbaland's president, Madobe, was first elected in 2013 by clans, elders and politicians. Madobe is a key ally of Kenya, while the federal government in Mogadishu is getting closer to Ethiopia. Let's bring in our guests here in the studio. Afyari Almi, Professor of International Relations at the Qatar University. In Nairobi, via Skype, Matt Bryden, Chairman of the Sahan Research Institute and former coordinator for the UN Monitoring Group on Somalia and Eritrea. And in London, Jamal Osman, an award-winning Somali journalist. Welcome to the program. Afyari, this is an election in a region in Somalia, but yet it has become a hot topic. Why is that?
Well, I think let's start within the context so that at least we understand what's going on. There is a legal ambiguity within the Somali constitution, and therefore this debate is more or less about the essence of the Somali state, what it will be. Is it federal, confederal, unitary state? This debate is now being played in Kismayo now. That's one level. The other level is there is mistrust between the regional leaders and the national leaders, so-called the Mogadishu. And this is largely based on the power struggle which has been going on for quite some time. This, again, manifested itself in numerous ways, not only in Jubbaland, but also in other parts. And many believe the Somali government in Mogadishu is trying to impose central system in the country, particularly taking note of what happened in Baidoa and other, maybe Johar and also in Galmudug. These are the, the backgrounds. And the final thing, perhaps, and the final main point is that the regional countries, particularly the neighboring countries, have also their own interests and playing their proxies in the
We will talk about the regional implications. Matt, each time you're having elections in any part of Somalia, then you have a great deal of anxiety about what's happening, the key players, and what could happen next. Is it bringing about the need to see the whole political system in Somalia?
I think that's a key question. And I agree with Professor Elmi that this issue in Kismayo is about the essence of the Somali state. But in certain areas, there's more ambiguity than in others. In the case of state elections, the Constitution assigns the responsibility for the establishment of state or provincial executives and legislatures to the states themselves. It doesn't award the federal government any role. And so what is really creating the tension around the Kismayo election and the other processes that Professor Elmi referred to is that the federal government is trying to impose itself and is arrogating to itself powers over the way elections take place in different parts of the country that it doesn't actually have. Then building on that, as Professor Ilmi said, regional powers are aligning themselves behind either the federal or the state governments. And so this issue is taking on proportions that go far beyond a normal Somali state-level electoral process.
Jamal, one of the reasons why the government in Mogadishu seems to be pretty much concerned about the elections in Jubbaland is the fact that it could further pave the way for Jubbaland to break away from the centralized government, which seems to be a genuine concern by the government.
Yes, I would agree with the previous speakers, Matt and Afiera, that the Somalis are figuring out which political system they take. There's mistrust between the leaders. But there is also another important issue, which is Somalis as a society. We're a clan-based society. And we have been fighting each other for the past 30 years for domination. Every clan wants to dominate other clans. And I would say that the president, Farmajo, is abusing the office of the president to empower his clan. And what he literally wants is his clan to dominate Jubbaland and Kismayo. And that is not something Somalis usually like to talk about. But the reality is, we can talk about policies, but Farmajo has the interest of his clan at heart, not the interest of the Somali nation. And I think that is another issue which we have to tell our audience.
Afiari, you've heard what Jamal has just said, which is the clan connections which happen to be the decisive factor in these elections. Madobe, for example, comes from Ogaden. Farmajo is from the Marihan. And those clan connections or affiliations are one of the reasons why Somalia disintegrated in 1991 and continues to face the same problems.
Well, I have to say that even though clan system is a reality within the Somali context, I'm not one of the people who use clan narrative to explain every conflict. I think there are levels, and at times the individual ambitions override even the clan interests and this and that. Anybody who is in Mogadishu was trying to impose itself in other parts of the country. This has been happening even before this, before the civil war during Mohammed Siad Barre, and also Sharif did not. I mean, Sheikh Sharif, President Sharif, and also President Hassan Sheikh did not agree with the way Jubbaland or other places were also being established. So when you look at it, this is a debate between centralism and more or less a practice based on confederalism. And to some extent, actually one of the regions want to secede from the rest. So I come back to the previous point where basically it's about the essence of the Somali state. Do we go for a confederation where literally, FMSs, we call it, or Jubbaland and Puntland and Galmudug and other regions are more or less operating as though they are independent states, or so-called, engaging other countries or denying the so-called central government to come. So this is a real debate that has been going on for some time prior to Farmajo, and I think it will go on even after. We can just put the clan, aspect of it
You think this is a politically motivated issue?
It's more of a political motivation, I would say.
Matt, you have Madobe, who is now the front runner in the election in Jubbaland. There are three other key candidates also in the election. However, what's quite interesting is that suddenly you're having regional players jostling for influence. The Kenyans seem to be really pro-Madobe. The government in Mogadishu seems to be favoring other candidates. Why is this happening?
Well, this is a really interesting point, because Jubbaland was established almost as a joint initiative of Ethiopia and Kenya, working together, supporting Madobe's forces to force Al-Shabaab out of the port city of Kismayo. And until a year ago or so, Ethiopia and Kenya saw eye to eye and were close allies, not only in Jubbaland, but also in their support to the state-building process in Somalia. But since the arrival in power in Ethiopia, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, he has reversed Ethiopia's long-standing policy of support for a more decentralized federal structure and has embraced the leadership in Mogadishu. And so what has happened is that suddenly Kenya finds itself supporting Madobe, as it always has since the beginning, or at least the electoral process that's been organized under Madobe's auspices, while Ethiopia seems to have aligned itself with Mogadishu, not in a subtle way, but in a way that it has also signaled that it will not recognize the outcome of the elections and that Madobe must be removed by any means possible. And so this has put Ethiopia and Kenya not only at odds politically, but as recently as yesterday, we saw their forces in a standoff at Kismayo Airport, which could easily have degenerated into violence between two countries that are long-standing neighbors and allies.
Jamal, you said earlier that this is the right of the people in Jubbaland to pursue their political ambitions. But when you look at the latest developments, the different candidates vying for bigger influence backed by different countries, isn't this a scenario where we are most likely going to end up having proxies fighting on behalf of other regional players in Jubbaland?
I'm sure there will be some proxies, but I have been going back and forth to Kismayo this year. And in fact, I was there last month filming a documentary. And I think the Jubbaland administration is powerful. They have strong military. There would be challenges. They would face challenges. But I think they would overcome with the support of Kenya, obviously. And I think we have to remind ourselves, Somalis, as I said, have been fighting for many years. We are desperate for peace. And Ahmed Madobe and his sort of administration have brought peace. And Kismayo has been the most peaceful city in southern and central Somalia. So you would ask yourself, why would you destroy this peace? You can solve this issue through the ballot. You can solve this issue through negotiations. But why would the central government, led by Farmajo, is using Ethiopian soldiers to cause havoc and conflict? As Matt said yesterday, there was a standoff between the Ethiopians and the Kenyans. And the conflict could erupt. But that is the question. We need peace. And Kismayo is a very peaceful city. So and elections so far are going according to plan. So why
Jamal,
would you destroy
just for the sake of more,
we'd
like just to further explain this to our international audience. What's the end game here for the people in Jubbaland? Do they want to take this as an opportunity to consolidate their political gains and say in the future, we would like to have an independent state of our own?
I don't think the people in Jubbaland want an independent state. I think the Madobe and others are pro-unionist. They want united Somalia, in fact. But I think the issue they have is with the central government led by Farmajo. But if another leader comes or changes hand, and I remember he had issues with the previous leader, Hassan Sheikh, at the beginning, but after 2 years, they became very close and they were working together very closely. So I think it comes down to the relationship between the leaders and what interest each leader has and what he is trying to achieve.
Afyar, you've heard what Jamal basically was saying, that the problem lies in the central government based in Mogadishu, which wants to just continue its control over the political establishment in whole Somalia, irrespective of the ambitions of the different groups across the country.
Well, that is true, and I agree with the view that the central government has been trying to project a power that it doesn't have. I mean, it's all doing these things, even though it's not strong enough to do that. Because if it can, then I mean, everything could have been settled by force, but they cannot do it. Therefore, the only other option for any government in Mogadishu is to negotiate its way. These are the only two ways. Either you negotiate or you, military victory. These are the two ways that conflicts end. And at the moment, what it seems is that Mogadishu is not strong enough, yet it does not want to negotiate with others. And that's, for me, a contradiction. And honestly speaking, even though I am largely in the view of decentralized unitary system. I think what Farmajo, the practice at least that we have seen in other states, is not helping. Okay, in what happened in Baidoa or what happened in other cities are not helping at all. But that said, when you look at the practice of the regional government as well, or leaders,
Somaliland, in Puntland,
well, Somaliland at least wants to succeed, but others like Puntland, Jubbaland, Galmudug, whatever they also have been pursuing the practice-wise
secessionist agendas,
more or less not secessionist but confederal model, which is like they were engaging in so many areas of or so many functions out that might belong to the central government.
And this is quite
and here is a very interesting, actually, dichotomy, okay? Is it just that the central government that is trying to create a unitary system? Maybe that's what Farmajo is thinking of, and that is, there is evidence for that. But the other side is not innocent in this case, because they are acting as though they are independent states.
Okay.
And I think there are so many, examples that we can give if we have
Let's
time.
take this conversation forward. Matt, doesn't this look a little bit opaque to you in a way that we're talking about elections in Jubbaland, but then there's absolutely no definition about what kind of political establishment you want to have in across the country? So who is to blame? The Somalis themselves, the political leadership, or the international community?
I think in this case, the blame lies very much with the leadership in Mogadishu. As Afiere said, we have a federal constitution, but it's incomplete. And what the constitution, the provisional constitution says, which means we essentially have a provisional government, is that the powers that are undefined, the powers between the federal leadership and the states, issues like revenue collection and natural resource ownership and management, these are to be negotiated between the federal states and the federal government itself in Mogadishu. Now, the last president set up something called the National Leaders Forum, where he invited the state presidents to the table to start discussions about all of these pending issues that the Constitution leaves unresolved. But this president has disbanded the National Leadership Forum, and as Afiere said, has not shown any real inclination to negotiation. It seems just to be trying to impose its fiat by using third parties like Ethiopia or using donor countries who provide it with money to do its bidding. It's a sort of weaponizing of its juridical sovereignty to dominate the federal member states. So I think the real issue here is that either President Farmajo and his team become the conveners in chief and they bring the leaders together and say, look, let's talk. And we might even talk about going to a federal, a centralized, decentralized unitary system rather than a federal one, if that's what Farmajo's agenda really is. Or Farmajo will probably leave office in a year, having accomplished virtually nothing except having stalemated the state-building process and left Somalia worse than he found it.
Jamal, the supporters and loyalists of Madobe see him as the man who has brought stability to Jubbaland and defeated the Al-Shabaab. But don't you see this as an exaggeration? Because the Shabaab remain extremely powerful in huge areas across the country.
It is true. I mean, Al-Shabaab control about 70 kilometers outside Kismayo. But in Kismayo and where the Jubbaland forces are in control, apart from the attack that happened last month, Kismayo has been very peaceful. Nothing has happened in the past few years except that attack. And as I said, I visited Kismayo this year, and it's a very peaceful city, and it has been very peaceful for several years. And I think we have to understand from a local Somali perspective, we in the diaspora often talk about policies, but for the local people, all they care is about peace and stability, but they don't really care who brings that peace and security. And Kismayo is one of those cities that changed hands many times during the civil war, and all the major clans are vying for control of Kismayo. So it was a test case for Ahmed Madobe. But he has managed to somehow unite people in Kismayo and bring peace and security. So in Kismayo, he's, as far as I have seen, he's very popular with the local people because they might not agree with certain things he does, but at least he brought peace and security. But it's the central government that is trying to overthrow him and bring someone in his place.
Let's talk about the regional implications. Afiari, Kenya now is staunchly supportive of Madobe. However, why are they involved? Is it because they would like to see Jubbaland as a buffer zone against Al-Shabaab, or is it more to do with the border dispute in the 100,000 kilometers square, which is off the coast of the Indian Ocean?
Well, Kenya actually wants to use, it has many leverages. Among them is so-called the Jubbaland as a buffer zone. And when this maritime dispute came up, one of the leverages that it actually used was the Jubbaland issue. But it's not the only one, I would say. All in all, there are about 500,000 refugees, a large community, business community in Kenya, and of course other leverages that now it enjoys more than Mogadishu. But that also helped Mogadishu in the sense that they played the nationalist card by saying that, oh, you know what, this is our sovereignty and Kismayo just belongs to, is part of Somalia. So that has been the case for now. Regionally, though, it's not only Mogadishu versus the Kenya, also Ethiopia is involved here. And this time, strangely enough, that even though Farmajo has been using this card in a successful way, he is using Ethiopia is not going to help him in his popularity. And exactly that's why previous president lost power. And I think he's not very well advised in just
when it comes to this issue.
When it comes to this issue.
Matt, why would the Ethiopian government, which in the past teamed out with the Kenyans, send troops inside Somalia, disagree with the Kenyans and decide to support a new candidate? Why would a country take such a massive gamble that could backfire in Jubbaland?
Well, I think that's very hard to explain. Ethiopia's policy on Somalia has been consistent for the better part of 3 decades. And this 180-degree switch under Prime Minister Abiy seems to be more a result of idiosyncratic, highly personalized leadership rather than any kind of strategic policy shift. And I think for Ethiopia, as Afiere said, it's really ill-advised. It seems as though anyone in the Ethiopian policy establishment with understanding of Somali politics has disappeared or been replaced, because Ethiopian troops in Somalia have generally been seen as perhaps a benign presence. They've been able to operate with the support of local communities. If you look at what happened when the election in Baidoa was essentially hijacked by Mogadishu, and the leading candidate was arrested by Ethiopian troops and detained in Mogadishu, where he remains. Essentially, Ethiopian troops became blind. The community stopped cooperating.
I see your point.
And they suffered their worst attacks, over 70 of them killed in a decade.
Jamal,
so
it's
an inexplicable change of heart.
I see your point. Jamal, this is going to be my last question to you. Please, in less than half of a minute. It's not only the Ethiopians or the Kenyans who are vying for bigger influence. You have also the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Qataris, and the Turks. Do you have any concerns that this jostling for bigger political stake could create some instability in the area?
Yes, there are many foreign actors who are playing the politics in Somalia who have different interests, regional governments like Kenya and Ethiopia, and then the Gulf states, and also the Western countries. And I think the longer this goes, the worse for Somalis, the more actors you would have who would arm different groups to fight against, which that's what we have seen in Somalia for many years. But I think it can be avoided. It can be avoided.
Thank you very much indeed, Jamal. Osman, Matt, Bryden, Afiari, Ilmi. I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Hashim Ahalbara, and the whole team here in Doha. Bye for now.